Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Building Capacity to Demonstrate the Impact of Self-Advocacy Efforts, the framework for assessing self-advocacy outcomes. I'm Cherie Moon, the ITAC Manager. I'll be your host today, and we have joining us our ITAC Director, Cheryl Matney. Next slide, please, Cheryl. So the materials for today's webinar, you can find on our website, and also if you received the update that I sent you guys on yesterday, you should have received the materials assessing advocacy outcomes and measuring outcomes of self-advocacy programming, a self-assessment tool for councils. Next slide, please, Cheryl. In addition to the statement on the slide, ACO wanted to help councils close the gap between intermediate outcomes and long-term outcomes. And they created this evidence-informed framework and self-assessment tool to help councils achieve their goal. This research was conducted with the following questions in mind. What outcomes do councils and external programs track? What are council-specific and external program-specific outcomes? What criteria should ACO consider for inclusion in future council efforts to ensure evidence-based effectiveness and self-advocacy supports and resources? Today, I will briefly cover outcomes from this framework, and Cheryl will cover the self-assessment tool. Now let's talk about what the research shows. Next slide, please, Cheryl. What did the research show? The research showed that DD councils focused on measuring inputs, outputs, and activities related to their self-advocacy research. During the time of this research, few councils measured the long-term outcomes of self-advocacy efforts and resources. They did, however, measure the most common outcomes and the most common positive outcomes and activity characteristics that produce the greatest impact. An example of that activity would be activity characteristics from self-advocates. They stated that having a person with IDD as the trainer and information on how to influence policy and peer-to-peer events were the greatest impacted activities. Next slide, please, Cheryl. The most common outcomes measured by DD councils and external programs. Almost all of the DD councils and a little more than half of the external programs surveyed use surveys to measure outputs and outcomes data. Most DD councils develop their survey questions based on ACO performance measures. Councils and external programs measured similar outcomes, with the most common being one you all may recognize. The first bullet on this slide resembles a federal performance measure. Now let's look at the positive outcomes. Next slide, please, Cheryl. Councils and external programs offer a wide variety of self-advocacy activities like educational workshops, guides, and workbooks. Activities like this are what help contribute to positive outcomes reported as seen here on the slide. Now we can look at a few more of the characteristics of activities that have the greatest impact. Next slide, please, Cheryl. This research was created in 2020. Interviews were conducted with DD councils and self-advocates, all of which provided information on their perspectives regarding which activity characteristics have the greatest impact. Additionally, they gathered the perspectives of external program participants on this topic. As the numbers came in, what you see here on this slide is the order of impact. We are using this framework to highlight key takeaways. These are evidence-informed, and the focus was important for us to point out. So a few key takeaways were to improve the likelihood of positive long-term outcomes or impacts of self-advocacy efforts and resources, use practices that are evidence-based informed, and consider focusing on the type of practice and the focus of the practice to determine individual level, family level, systems level outcomes, or others. Now I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Cherie. As we look at the framework, so Cherie has done a great job reviewing what the research showed and really what the focus of the research was designed to do. So when we look at how you can really use the framework and your council can benefit from the framework, this tool can help you guys think through current measurement practices and evaluation tools. It can help you determine if your counsel is indeed using evidence-based or evidence-informed methods. I suspect most of you will be validating that you guys are actually using evidence-based and evidence-informed methods. You can also really see very clearly what is working well, and you will be able to see clearly where opportunities exist for improvement. And ultimately, you always continue to increase your understanding about measurement practices. But this particular framework really focuses on your self-advocacy activities and efforts. So it really is very specialty focused on that particular area. Some of the items in the tool, the key items that you guys, we're going to look at the tool in just a minute, but you will see that there is a series of questions around the practice information. So the people that you are focusing on, the type of practice. I know that we in DD Council world don't use the term practice. These are really our strategies and our methods of how we do self-advocacy activities. So, sometimes when we talk about the type of practice, you're going to see some questions or some prompts around, is it skill building? Is it knowledge development? And the focus of what it is you are doing with your self-advocacy efforts. Are you increasing knowledge in a specific area, a topical area, like supported decision making or employment? Then it also has you guys look at a series of questions around your data sources. And so this is designed to let you guys know, do your current data sources really build a foundation for you then to measure those intermediate and longer term outcomes? There's a nice section around collective data sources, everything you're using to inform your work. There, as Cherie mentioned, since there was a big focus on evidence-based, evidence-informed criteria, because we know through research globally that if you are using evidence-based, evidence-informed practice, those methods and practices do lend itself to you being able to achieve those positive outcomes. So in this framework, there's a big item, a big section in the tool so that you can evaluate your individual counsel strength in using those evidence-based, evidence-informed practices. And then there's a series of questions around short-term outcomes, intermediate outcomes, and then longer-term outcomes. And in these sections, as Cherie said, we've done globally, councils have done a great job in measuring short-term outcomes. So I think you'll find most of you are very strong in that area. And then we can start looking for ways to improve the ability to demonstrate and capture data so we can demonstrate intermediate and longer-term outcomes. The framework is designed as a self-assessment. So there is a scoring method in this particular framework, and there is guidance offered so that you can interpret your score. And so let's take an opportunity to look at the self-assessment tool in depth. So when you guys see when you open the file online, we have made this fillable for you so that it should all work so that you're not having to print it and write your numbers in. But this really is what the assessment looks like. And so, you know, this is, you guys could use it for yourself. You could also share this with other organizations that do self-advocacy training. I think about, if you have a grantee or you have a self-advocacy organization as a grantee, you might find some of these elements helpful as you guys are working with them on, being able to realize outcomes that are more than just short term or just the outputs, the number of people trained. And then here is some of the information I was referring to, and I'll try not to scroll very fast to make people dizzy, but the type of practice. And you guys, but really think about this, the type of program you're putting together. Is it peer training? Is it leadership training? We think about, like, a lot of the leadership training that we're all doing. Some of these won't make any sense to us, like life coaching. I don't know how many of you do life coaching, but you may, another provider might. Um, some type of educational toolkit. Are you educating people about voter rights? Was there a toolkit that you were using to do that? Maybe accessing resources. Um, so you can look at the type of effort you're doing and make some adjustments here. I know there needs to be some adjustments made. And then we've got the focus of the project, a focus of the program. Is it self-advocacy? Is, which would be able to speak for yourself, say what you want or need. Is it around education, employment, maybe that voter education, supported decision making. We see more and more abuse prevention, how to keep yourself safe. And it's, you could refine it. So if you had a specific project around sexual abuse or physical abuse, and you're doing specific efforts on that and want to see what the longer term outcomes were as a result of doing your training, they learned, the people in the audience learned stuff. And then longer term outcome could be there was, they experienced a reduction in, or were able to keep themselves safe. So I thought this was a very interesting way to be able to demonstrate some longer term outcomes. And if you have a program, remember, everything doesn't need, you don't have to do deep dives on every little thing. But if you know that you have a project that is really successful, you may want to follow that along as a way to demonstrate those longer term outcomes. Supported decision making comes to mind, because we do a lot of education about that. And people say that they know more about supported decision making. So follow that one along a little further. As a result of them using what they learned, then are they making their own decisions and leading more self-determined lives? So it might be a good way to highlight with a project, you know, your outcomes on that. And then this is some of the data sources, and this is a select all that you use. Do you do a pre-survey and a post-survey, or are you doing interviews? Most of us do satisfaction surveys. We want to know if people were satisfied with the information. Did they learn something? Did they know more about a topic? Maybe outcomes or experience survey, or anything else. You guys do a lot of great survey data collection, so you may have something different. And then, level of outcomes.
Are these individual level outcomes, meaning for an individual? Are they family level outcomes? Sometimes you guys do provider level or program level outcomes. I don't, you know, you'll have to tell me. System level outcomes, and maybe you have some other level of outcome. And so for each one of these areas, you're going to see the how to score, and then you'll move on. And so now they're going to look at, trying to help you assess your data sources. So there is a section about your data sources. You know, really trying to, and they tell you what the goal is for this, to collect data that can lead to long-term impact, and really produce objective results that you can report. And so it's fairly easy. I know you guys can read and get your score, interpret your score, and then move on. So there is a section for evaluating the strength of your evidence-based practice. And so in this particular one of the research documents, and it's called the Review of DD Council Self-Advocacy Activities and Recommendations, or something like that. It's one of the further reading documents. There is a 3-page logic model. I know you guys are jazzed about that. So a 3-page logic model, which is not optimal, but that's the way it came out, inside this document, in the review document, not the framework document, but the review document, the research document. And so they did develop a predetermined logic model, and they aligned it with best practices and available research. So you might want to take a look at that. It's just a way to further educate yourself about, oh, okay, this aligns with what we developed. Or maybe there's an opportunity to improve what you've already developed. And then you'll just walk through the criteria. And the full criteria is at the end of this document. So you guys I know you're going to find that you're using evidence-based, evidence-informed research or practice here. So you can just validate for yourselves, justify yourself. And this one's, got a few more points in it, but again, you'll come up with your total, and then you will interpret your score. And then the tool moves into those outcome measures. And it starts off with short term, moves to intermediate, and then goes to longer term. And these are all yes, no questions when you're looking at these. And so this will help you see then that you're collecting data that addresses the shorter term outcomes. And again, it's going to help you see what you already have embedded in your processes, and maybe it might show where you can make a couple of improvements to get the data you need to then demonstrate, your short-term outcomes. And some of these might not apply. So, you got to take that, like, are we social skills? Your activity may not have that. You may not, what if you're not using pre and post? There's certain things around financial literacy. So again, this is, some of these items I realize we fall short with what it is we're trying to do, but some of them are very relevant. So, did you help people become a better leader? A lot of us do that in DD Council land, but we might not all be working on financial literacy. So you will have to take take in mind that some of these things, keep in mind that some of these things will not be relevant, and it will tinker with your score, right? Because if you're not answering some of these questions, then you're not going to have a score for that. But I think you guys will be able to figure that out in where, you know, you can see clearly that you probably will not be able to, you'll have to take the, you know, adjust this. And man, that's, I know it's going to mess with it. I know it's going to mess with how you're interpreting your scores, but you can't really ding yourself because you're not working in some of these areas. Like, not everybody's going to do financial stuff. And again, when you look at intermediate, you know, if you have activities where you've asked your folks then to take what they learned, say you did a educated, you did a maybe taught people how to educate policymakers, and you want it, now we're looking intermediate, so you taught them, they learned, you know, some strategies about talking to a policymaker or writing to a policymaker. Now you want them to do something, you want them to actually then use what they learned and wrote a policymaker or talk to a policymaker. And so, you know, now you're able to then take it to the next level. Did people join an advisory board or a group or a committee? Did they become members of a self-advocacy group? Maybe you educated them about the benefits. They learned about self-advocacy and they took action and joined a group. So again, here you would just be adding the things. If you have additional things that you want to measure, then you can really think about taking it to that next level, intermediate level. And then when you get down to the, and this can go on for a while, I see, your long-term outcome. Now we're talking about when people increased their knowledge about something or their skill about something, and then they used it. Now, what is the next step? Are they leaders? You know, have they taken on a leadership role? Do they have, maybe if it was an employment related project, is there a paid job? Or, you know, did they enter some type of education program? Again, some of these things may not be relevant to you, but I think you'll be able to see where the administration's efforts, and they're trying to get all of us to think about the longer term outcomes. You know, was there a significant change at the end of our efforts? And so when you look at this tool, you're going to see that you'll get your overall score here. And then they say, okay, well, we want you to understand that you might have some room for improvement, or, you know, you might just be fabulous. So, you know, I know that you guys can read. I don't want to read to you, but they did come up with and SCDD just stands for State Council on Developmental Disability, but the evidence-informed practice criteria. The real key here is that the administration does want DD councils to use evidence-based, evidence-informed practices when doing self-advocacy efforts. Actually doing all of our efforts, but they have honed in on self-advocacy. So anytime that you have the opportunity to really, you know, say in a report to your funder that you're using evidence-based practice, always a good thing. And this is a tool to help you with that. Now, when you
come down to, now that let me get back to our PowerPoint, and that was a brief review. People want to know, okay, if I do this self-assessment exercise, what am I going to do with the results? You know, how can I even use it? Well, you could use it and think about it, a group discussion. It could be with other council staff members. It could be you have a self-advocacy committee who's monitoring your self-advocacy efforts on your council. You might have a group, you might have, you know, conversations with your grantees on a quarterly basis. I know some councils do quarterly grantee meetings. Some councils do, you know, meetings with similar grantees, like all grantees doing research or all grantees doing something for self-advocates. So you could, you know, have a group discussion with them and really think through, you know, let's look at what we do well. Do we have any gaps in what we're currently doing, or are we good? Are we good with what we're trying to measure here? Are there opportunities that we can take immediately to take those gaps and turn them into what's going well? And then, you know, you don't have to go big. Let's just say, let's agree, what can we all, you know, all of us right now, what's the one thing we can do? Just the one thing we can do to improve our practice impacts. And that add should have an N in the middle to make and, sorry about that, and how we measure our impacts. You could also use this tool as a component of your 5-year planning process, just as a development, you know, thinking through what you want to achieve as a short-term, intermediate, longer-term impact for your self-advocacy efforts. So that could be something you would want to do. You could use this for, you know, baselining and benchmarking. So you could look at what your initial results were on this tool and use that as your baseline. And then a year from now or 2 years from now, do it again and see where you've made those improvements. So you could use it as an internal quality indicator, how you're improving the quality of your evaluation and assessments processes for self-advocacy. You could create an action plan, you know, because we all need one more plan. So these are recommendations from the researchers. So, you know, specific to self-advocacy outcomes, you know, if you wanted to, you know, break it all down into smaller, shorter, achievable targets, you could do that. But really, you know, looking at what could happen, what you expect to see as an outcome, more intermediate and longer term from your short-term outcomes that you've been collecting. You could, you know, the state plan includes some information. The DD Act talks about measuring and reporting your self-advocacy outcomes separately. So you could use this as a way to help develop that self-advocacy evaluation component of your overall council evaluation plan. That's another thing you could do. And, you know, if you do this self-assessment and you find that you need some additional help, you know, you can request, you know, just contact Cherie or myself, ask for some support, ask, you know, what, if you had this score, what would you do with it? Or, you know, maybe identifying just what you could improve as a result. Because there's a lot of information in there. And then you guys know where to find us. You're all our friends. And I'm going to stop the share. Cherise put up a little poll because we too are trying to measure our impact. But let's just talk. What do you guys think? You know, questions, thoughts, comments?
This is Nia. Just a quick question. Is this available on the iTech website now? I was looking for it and
Yes,
I must
it
be missing
is.
it. Okay.
So go to resources and then click on advocacy. And I think it's going to be, I don't know, third bullet down. I don't know. It says, I think it might be the third bullet down. And all of the resources are on that one item. You'll see this PowerPoint. You will see the fillable document where it's been edited down, doesn't have all the junk in it. And then you'll see the original documents. You'll see the research article, which is about 40 some pages long. And again, dazzling reading. Might want to do it at night so you get a good night's sleep. And then you'll see the full framework in there.
Great, thank you. I think I'll have to read through it in more detail before I have.
Yeah. And you know, it does a lot of resources in the back of the research part of it, where it really identifies certain programs that were involved in the research. And so it's got a lot of things that support what they are, what their findings were. So some of it I think you guys will find very interesting. Since it was an investment by ACL, we're sharing this with you guys as a way to just give you another tool. You know, as with everything TA does, these are not requirements. These are things that you might find helpful as you implement your self-advocacy programming. But the administration is pretty interested in having councils really take some additional efforts to show those longer term outcomes. And since self-advocacy is that required element, those 3 activities that must occur each year of the state plan, they made this investment for this framework. And so we wanted to share it with you, you know, the beginning of your new state plan, just as a way to, you know, help you guys think a little bit further on your self-advocacy longer term outcomes.
Well, thank you for sharing it. I mean, I think that, you know, Maine invests a fair amount of its allotment into self-advocacy, and I think it's helpful to understand how our funders are thinking about it. Like, I think that's useful, because sometimes it's not, you know, that I'm going to look through it. I'm guessing that there will be something in there for us, and it will certainly be something in there for the self-advocacy organization that like has really succeeded in getting you know, in getting funding outside of the council, and you know, and from, you know, other people who might be like in the way.
That's cool. Thanks, Rachel. Alicia?
I really liked the idea of the practice information, because I've always struggled with thinking about the annual work plans in the data collection and evaluation section. Some of what to put in there, obviously, and I always focused more on, well, what surveys are we doing? Just sort of a general, you know, Likert type 8 questions kind of about the survey itself. But I had been pressed by Jessica Pigeon, who used to be with the New York Council, that I wasn't necessarily putting enough about the data collection side of things in that description area. And this to me is a great way to summarize like key elements that ACL might want to know about how you're going to, sorry, I've got a train coming through, about how you might want to, about how you're going to handle sort of some of that data collection and methodology and stuff in a very succinct. So I think that's something I want to build right away into the fiscal year 23 annual work plan as I'm doing edits. So because I still haven't, I shouldn't admit this, but I still haven't completed my update. I still got to the 15 people.
Hey man, 90% of the country hasn't completed, so you are golden.
That's right. But I was also sort of a little bit zoning out because I was actually filling out the tool as we're sitting here because it was just fascinating to me. So I was going through just from my memory, and yeah, right away I can see some things that I hadn't thought about before, and we're just now undergoing a big transition into we've always done some long-term evaluation, but now we're really looking at it across all 3 goal areas for this plan cycle. And we're just starting to have meetings with the you said that's going to help us, and between the 3 goal leads and myself and another staff member who's also responsible for this. So I think this will be a great tool to help all of us think about this as we start to set up, okay, what evaluations are we going to do in this 5-year cycle, long-term evaluations, and what years are we going to do them and how we're going to do them, because we're not just going to do surveys, we're going to talk to people this time. You know what I mean? And so anyway, couldn't be better timing. So thank you very much.
Well, Alicia, I think you were part of this research.
Was I?
I think
I can't remember. Sorry.
well, here's the fruit of your labor. So I do think I want to say yes, you were, because you guys were cited, and Alicia is from the Tennessee Council, as you can see on her backdrop. But they were cited as the only council in the research that collected long-term outcomes, and primarily that is because when you implement the Partners in Policymaking program, and you know, where if you're really implementing the Partners in Policymaking program, they have the long-term outcome or long-term follow-up survey. It's not called an outcome, but it's a follow-up survey, which does have people self-report what the outcomes have been from how they've used their training. And I think that's really the point. You know, frankly, I've been, I will tell you guys that, you know, your projects or program specialists are reviewing your PPRs. And so there's a lot of data analysis that is happening right now. And so I get to see the data, I get to see how they've analyzed your data. And so, you know, and it's your program specialists don't do the analysis. They actually have a data analyst who does that, who is not Jack or Sarah. So I'm going to be honest with you. And, you know, one of the things, the very first thing out of the box was, you know, we want councils really to know how we use your data. We justify the funding requests for DD councils nationally through the data that you provide on your PPRs. And so, yes, we are aware, but I'm not sure we are aware that they use our information for funding purposes, but I'm not sure that we were super acutely aware of how the data is being used. So because we have this, you know, we're all required to do self-advocacy stuff and have been required since 2000. And some of you longer term people, like me and Alicia and maybe Margie, you know, we all remember remember when employment was the required item? Way back in the olden days, it was employment. And then in 2000, when the DD Act was reauthorized, self-advocacy became the required element. So this is the one data point that every single council reports on. So this is the administration's efforts. And I know you guys are probably tired of hearing about outcomes and impact, but that's not going to go away, not for the next 5 years, at least for this 5-year plan. So I appreciate your comments that it's good to know what they're thinking and what they're putting their money towards, because this does give you guys a glimpse into it, into really how they're thinking about, you know, that importance of the logic model and how it is then they're not giving up at the short term outcome. They want to see intermediate and long term. So
I just wanted to add, Tennessee was, yes, you're right, good at the partners. That was and what we want to do now is make sure we do it not only for all the stuff that falls under goal 1, which is AIM and scholarship, but a bunch of stuff, but then also what does long-term evaluation look like under our communications activities, which includes our targeted disparity work into the intersection of health, people with disabilities who are part of the LGBTQ plus community as they're trying to access healthcare, and then also public policy, which is our goal 2, and really wanting to look at long-term outcomes with the policy changes that were, so it's, we really want to go much broader. And I will say another component we are now adding in is, and it made me laugh because I saw it on the tool, which is, and getting this information published.
oh yeah,
So we've had luck with a partners article. This was published in a peer-reviewed journal. We just had Lead Tennessee, an article on Leads, which is a program we developed that was published in a journal peer-reviewed article. And so we are deliberately targeting what, along with the research we want to do, can we make it end up in a published peer-reviewed journal? And
right.
Not that we won't do research that can't go that route, but we want to have that conversation as we're looking at long-term evaluation, because councils do a lot of really cool stuff that people
That's
don't
right.
get to see. So anyway, just
well, and all of that. So, you know, just to connect the dots, all of that publishing and getting things in peer-reviewed journals adds to the evidence-based practice foundation. So it is, you know, I know that's, and you've got partners, you know, you've got, like you said, who do, you know, publish all the time. They're viable council members. What a great collaboration item that could be for you guys. But hint, hint. So, so, you know, it's like, I know sometimes it gets overwhelming when we start like talking about things like this. But one of the data, and I just have to tell you this story, I just saw the data dump on creation of best practices. And I can say that to you guys, and you'll say, oh, councils don't do that. We don't create best practices, because that would be like, you know, we have to scientifically prove it. We have to prove it over time and then do a little bit of research, and then it's got to be published, right? So that it is a verified. Well, nationally, last year, you guys reported creating over 300. So, okay, you know, so now I've got the spreadsheet, so I'll be following up to see to see what we can, you know, we've got, if that is, if those are really valid data items, we're powerful in so many ways. We're not, you know, we may not be leveraging all of our opportunities to really influence practice. So anyway, other thoughts?
This is Margie. We just redid our self-advocacy organization grant for the next 5 years and had a lot of discussion with them about what they do, what we want to do, who should be part of it. We spent a lot of time. And one of the big things we acknowledged was that with that kind of a project, it's an ongoing thing. And many of the same people are there year to year. It's not like we're getting new people every time, which makes it somewhat problematic with the trying to do non-duplicative numbers in PPRs, because we really are talking about many of the same people on a year-to-year basis. And yet most of them are showing some kind of gain year to year. They benefit from being there another year. And the organization needs to have organizational activities geared to newbies, people for whom self-advocacy is something they really don't know anything about, can't speak for themselves at all. The idea of having a choice is brand new, up to those who are very articulate and ready to take on leadership roles, etc. So it also gets very tricky. Like, how do you measure what benefit a person has gotten when they're coming in at such a different baseline?
Yeah.
And we attempt to do some of that that long term, as people have been around. We know many of the members that have been there multiple years are much stronger advocates than they used to be. But yeah, and the measures that we have in the PPR don't really capture that very well. It's more just in some of the stories.
Right. Yeah, I would agree, Margie. And, you even think about it in terms of like cohorts, as they come into a self-advocacy organization. I thought the concept of topical, like, if looking at it through the lens of, if you do this year-long effort on, like, I have a council in my head I know is doing a lot of voter education, right? Everything from rights and registration to rights to the whole thing. Okay, so that might be a really I just never thought of measuring, and this is just me. If I was thinking back to my council staff days, I don't know that I would have. I think I thought of self-advocacy as the topic rather than self-advocacy, self-advocate training to really educate someone about X. So, it was more than what did you learn about, did you improve your knowledge on self-advocacy? Well, what about self-advocacy? So really kind of looking at it a little bit differently. I found that to be a little bit more, that is challenging, but understanding what it is we're trying to measure. What is it about self-advocacy? Is it the individual, personal skills, communication skills, topic specific? So thought-provoking for sure, right?
Yeah, there are not easy answers to this.
Ever. Well, okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We appreciate your time. If you need any help with the resources, or something's not working right for you, or you need it in a different, you need it in individual files or something, let us know. If you have any questions, let us know. We're happy to help.
Thank you. This was great.
Wonderful.
Appreciate both of y'all.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and I'll leave you to sign off.